Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Agile 42 webinar on implementing Agile at scale. We should be getting started here shortly, and our Q&A area in Zoom is open. Please don't confuse it with the chat window. If you do have any questions, place them in questions and answers. Lothar and Giuseppe will have some time to answer a few questions, to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. We'll also be recording the session and sending out info afterwards. So make sure to connect with us on the web. We'll link all of our usual social media channels in chat shortly. With that said, I'll be handing things over to Lothar and Giuseppe. And please feel free to participate and enjoy the webinar. Thank you very much.
So welcome everybody, and Lothar, maybe you can start sharing your screen so we can have everybody looking at the slides. It's very nice to have you all here and having 1 hour talking about implementing agility at scale. What are the challenges and what are some of the things to consider? I mean, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Giuseppe Simone. I'm a Scrum trainer and coach, and I've been, just working in a scale environment as a coach for the last 15 years. And so we'd be happy to share some of my learning. I'm together here with Lothar.
Yeah, hello, welcome from my side. My name is Lothar Fischmann. I'm located in Vienna, Agile coach since around about 9 years. Of the last 8 years in different scaled environments, and looking forward to share some insights on today's webinar together with you.
Okay, we would be interested also in knowing a little bit about you, like who we have in this webinar. So I'm just like launching a poll about, wanted to know a little bit more about you. So if you can just quickly pick what is that best describe your role, to see like a little bit of the who is in the room now. It seems like we have a majority of coaches. Giving you a few seconds more. And let's see, Jason, corporate trainer, fantastic. So I'm just like ending the poll and showing the result just to show who is in the room now. So we have definitely a majority of Scrum Master or coaches. It seems we also have an AI assistant here. And we have some developers and some other roles and a few leaders and project managers and so on. I assume that, the reason why you are here is because, can you go back to the previous slide, Lothar? Is because, not to the poll, is because, somehow you are kind of encountered, this, challenge about scaling agility or scaling to multiple teams, right? Or just like heard about it, or something that you think you would be soon be involved in. But I mean, the question I would like to ask you, and we have another poll here, is that, what are the problem that are you, or the problem or problems that are you trying to solve with scaling? So can you please just, get an answer, and if you don't find any of these questions that fits you, then it's okay not to answer, but just like feeling about what is that that we have here. And if you have never been involved in this, then also I understand that you might not really know what to answer. So I'm giving a little bit more time for this. it seems that, like the speed of answering is decreased now. So I'm going to share your result, right? It seems that, majority of you is about delivering large complex products, or, delivering fast, and, or, some kind of organizational alignment. Let me stop sharing. And, this is definitely quite a big issue, right? Because, for example, if you look at the Scrum Guide, of course, it talks about one team and with maximum 10 people, having a Scrum Master, product owner, and a number of developers. But, obviously in the current world, it's very hard that, most of our context, you will be able to deliver something meaningful in a time that is compatible with business needs, just, with one team. So what is scaling in the end, right? If you go to the next slide, Lothar, really, like, the goal of scaling, it's about enabling an organization to increase its capacity, but without necessarily adding more people. That's very important. That's very crucial, because sometimes we think about, that it's about adding 50 teams, or starting 100 teams, 30 teams per week. That's, one of the recent challenges we got from a potential customer of us, a potential lead. They want to start like 1,000 people working in Scrum with 30 teams at a time. That's not, we believe it is about scaling, right? This scaling is about the ability to increase the capability without necessarily adding more people. Lothar, you're going too fast. But I want to, now asking one more thing, is about, like, where, if you have, find yourself in this challenge, or this things about scaling or increasing your capability, what have been the challenges that you have encountered? Or if you are just about to start, what are some of the challenges that you think you will encounter? Okay, it seems we hit all of them a lot there, because it seems that all the options are relevant here. I'm going to give you again a few seconds here. Let me end the poll and share the results. You see that it's probably resistance to change or prioritization issues is a couple of the things, and lack of strategic goals, and maybe other stuff. I say a message about in the chat about leadership, and of course, bureaucracy, and so on and so forth. And when we talk about resistance to change, most of the time it's not because people resist to change, but they resist to be changed, or they resist to stupid changes. So, I mean, I want to summarize based on our experience. And if you go to next slides, I mean, what are, 4 of the critical choices that you need to take when scaling in order to address some of the challenges that you have expressed. And depending on which are the strategic choice that you make, you might have more or less of the challenges you just listed, right? And there is a lot of frameworks. We'll talk more about frameworks later on. There's a lot about frameworks that are on the market right now, and everybody seems to be obsessed or attracted by some of these more common frameworks. I mean, you can name it, right? But actually we don't want to, and you will learn that later on, we are actually not specifically enforcing any methodology or any things about scaling, but when we work with a client in a scaling initiative, we love to, put on the table those four critical choices and discuss with them about what makes most sense with them, and together discover what is that makes more sense as an approach. And that's what we want to do with you now. So the first dimension is about the product breadth. And the main question is about what is your product? This is the main question, right? And it's so important. And if you ask probably 10 different people in the same company about what is your product, or in the same department, the same business unit, what is your product, you're probably going to get 10 different answers, right? And actually, you can go very broad in your definition of product, or you can go very narrow in your definition of a product. For example, if you take a bank, right, you might argue that a bank has one product, which is their internet banking, regardless, whether it's on what is the channel that you are considering. But I mean, maybe you could even argue, say, well, this is not really true. That's not really one product, because if you think about, payment, mortgage, and insurance, they are actually three different products. Oh, wait a moment. I mean, if you think about payment, the part of our product that support the merchants and the part of our product support the buyers are actually two different products. But wait a moment. If you think about the buyers, actually for us, credit cards and debit cards are two different products. Oh, wait a moment, but for the credit card, we have two apps, one of the Android and one on iOS, and actually they are two different products. So you can go very broad or you can go very narrow. And, depending on what is your strategic choice about answering the question to what is our product, this can create a lot of implication. Let's take the simple example of the picture. Let's assume that you realize that you are working with three products: the blue product, the green product, the red product. And those products are so small that actually can be managed by one team. So you have the blue team, the green team, the red team. Each of those teams have their own product backlog, their own product owner. Kind of easy, like you follow the Scrum guide. It's kind of basic Scrum or basic whatever you are using. But probably you might realize that if you look them from closer distance, actually, these are not three different products. This is one product. And if you put everything in one backlog, you might realize that the most important thing is the green, and then you have two red and one green and one blue and so on and so forth. So if ideally you have three teams that can work on the same product, pulling any of these items from a common backlog, you would probably have a much more complicated way of handling this. But at the same time, you can make sure that everyone is working on the most important item in a given moment in time. While, the previous version, the previous, three teams approach, it's probably making things easier, but also there is a risk of sub-optimization, right? That's one dimension. Let's have the second dimension, component versus feature. So, I mean, let's assume you have 50 people, right? And you have to, split those 50 people into teams. And, one approach could be to say, let's try to have one team that is working on the front end, one team that is working on the middleware, one team is working on the back end, and one team on the hardware, and so on and so forth. In that way, we will make sure that the most competent people on a certain part of the product are the one who's going to work on those, right? But, unfortunately, our customers are evil. And regardless how much we teach them how they should give us requirements, they insist to ask for features that impact all the part of the system. And not only they don't understand, but they don't care, right? So they keep asking for features that impact all the layers of our system. So by having this kind of approach, we are imposing dependencies between the teams. So there will be no team that will have the autonomy to deliver end-to-end item of value to our customers. So they will be forced to to talk to each other. And since collaborating with each other and talk to each other all the time is creating delays and putting each other, I'm waiting for you and I'm putting these things in your backlog, you put these things in my backlog, and this is a drama. So to avoid that developers are doing this all the time, we create new roles that have just the role to handle these dependencies, and you call it coordinators, release train engineers, or project manager, however you want to call. Another option would be, okay, to put these 50 people in teams that have all the skills to touch any component in the system and to deliver autonomous and a piece of value to the customer. They are called feature teams. That not only they have the capability, but also they have the authority, because we are using some kind of collective code ownership. Of course, nothing of these things comes for free. Both options bring some problems and values, because in this case, you might have to work on the competence profile of your people. But again, it's a strategic choice. Other aspect, efficiency versus effectiveness. Imagine we have the same 50 people. How do you divide them? So we can decide, okay, let's have a team of programmers, a team of testers, a team of QA, a team of UX. So we make sure that programmers are programming 100% of the time and testers are testing 100% of the time. But again, which of these things would be autonomous to deliver value to customer? Probably none. Another approach is instead to focus on effectiveness, to have cross-functional teams that can focus on delivering the most important item as fast as possible. And it doesn't matter if someone who is specialized in testing has to program. Sometimes he will probably not be the best programmer in the world, but at least he will contribute to put out the most important stuff on to production. Last dimension, do we have a product owner per team or a product owner per product? And of course, this is connected with the product breadth definition. And again, if you think about the name, it's called product owner. So it's a owner of a product, not owner of a team. So ideally, on one side, we should have as less number of product owners as possible. Of course, this scales up to a certain level, but if we instead have a product owner per team, and you have to trust me with this because we don't have the time to demonstrate this, the more product owners you have, the more work each product owner is going to have, and the less authority each product owner is going to have. So in the end, they will end up to be what Craig Larman called team output owners. So they will not be owner of any kind of product. They will just make sure that their team is going to do as much as possible, and they will turn out to be project manager. Again, having a product owner for 6, 7, 8 teams have some implication. For example, the developers need to have more skills to be able to deal with backlog with more autonomy. But again, there are pros and cons. So depending on which choice you take, that's going to have a lot of implication. But how do we deal with this implication? And now Lothar, it's going to talk about different kind of approach we can take.
Yeah, thank you very much, Giuseppe. One of the critical questions that we're asking ourselves is like, which approach shall we choose if we want to scale agility in our organization? And one overview that helps me pretty much, and hopefully will help you as well, just to rethink about like, how can we approach the question of scaling, and probably also how can we put all these different offers that we're finding on the market, how can we sort them, is this one that I'm going to show you right now. We can distinguish between 3 main approaches. The first one is pattern-led scaling, the other one is principles-led scaling, and the third one is the practice-led scaling. So when we're talking about pattern-led scaling, then we're trying to understand what are the key challenges or the key things that our organization is facing, and how do we approach these things, like what is the problems that we're facing and how may potential solutions may look like. And if we then realize, okay, well, we have here some challenge that we have been able to solve, for example, by applying agile ways of working, and we find that other parts of the organization are facing similar problems, then we may think, okay, well, if that helped here, like a holistic approach helped here to solve a particular business problem, then we may think about scaling agility because this may be helpful to solve related business problems in a related way. The advantage of pattern-led scaling is that we're tackling things from a business side, so we're always keeping business problems in mind. The disadvantage is you have to understand organizational context, so it's not the easiest way to go. Another approach that we're finding pretty often out there is principles-led scaling. So when we talk about principles-led scaling, then we're saying, okay, I have experienced how Agile is working, and I feel that we're doing the right thing here. Like the principles people are following, the beliefs people are following, we have to do more of that. We have to behave like that as an organization to be successful. And this is, on the one hand side, very good from our point of view, because if you're approaching from here, then people are thinking about having a different understanding of agility. They are trying to understand agility from the core. The thing that is very dangerous, if you only come from a principles perspective, then it may be very hard to relate agility to any business problems. So people may end up in a lovely bubble, and they may have the heart at the right places, we would say, but they may have a hard time to connect to business problems or explain to their managers, hey, why should we do things that way and not as we've done them before? Because you would implement agility, but not give a particular answer to a question that is around in the company. The third approach is practice-led scaling. And practice-led scaling covers everything, all kinds of tactical practices that people may do. It's just about like, okay, let's get out of there and let's do something. And this is very good for people that are hands-on, because this provides you like concrete next steps that you can do, or how can we encounter that. And it also helps us to understand some things. So these things are related to each other. The principles will govern how we are tackling certain patterns, or how we will put practices in place. And practices, on the other hand, by applying things, we will get a deeper understanding of the fundamental principles that you find behind everything that comes along with agility. You can see that correlation when you're working with Agile teams of different experience, because they may learn in an intro training what Scrum values are, what Scrum principles are, how there was something with inspection, adaptation, and transparency. Fair enough. They heard that once, they learned it once. But they don't have such a deep understanding. But by practicing certain rituals, they will get a deeper understanding of why this is important, and they will get, again, a better understanding of the principle behind it. And then there is another relation between practices and patterns. Everything that comes along with practices is simply used to manage patterns. So practices are very helpful if applied in the right way. And if you're facing certain patterns, then it's good to have some practices in your back and think about like, hey, Giuseppe, I'm facing this and that problem. Do you have anything in mind? What could help us here, or what could provide you certain guidance? So there is a good question in the chat saying, where do less and safe fall in terms of approaches to scaling? And this is why we're taking practices one step deeper, because there are different things that we can determine between practices. So if we look into practices, there are, again, three main categories. The ones are framework-led. So when we talk about framework, then we're trying to talk about like a thin underlying structure. Most of these approaches or scaling frameworks that we may name a scaling framework may be based on the pure idea of Scrum, and they are rather thin, like easy to read. By thin, I mean if you go into any kind of guidance, you will have a guidance document which is 10 pages, but not longer. The anti-part of frameworks is methodologies. like methodology is a large pursuit of knowledge, and it gives a pretty good description of what is all included and how to execute and how to run all of these things. And here you're having the clear difference between SAFe and less, because if you look on SAFe, like this is coming along with this manual, and it will help you to give you all kind of guidance, including how does your PI planning have to look like, and how is the timing of your first PI planning, how to do it right. So here we're talking definitely about the methodology. Giuseppe, you wanted to add something here?
Absolutely not, but I'm ready with the quiz whenever.
Gotcha. Okay. The thing in the middle is a toolbox-led approach, where we're saying, okay, we're having one particular tool that is used tactically, and we're saying, okay, I think like this helped in a particular situation, and I'm facing this situation somewhere else in the organization or on a larger scale, and this helped here pretty well, so I may apply that somewhere else as well. And these are different things that you're seeing in practices. Some are coming along with benefits, some are coming along, or some are not so good. I would not recommend them that much, but that's a different question. What is important whenever we talk about practices, think about like how would they help you to answer any business problems or any challenges that your organization is facing. If we talk about different approaches to scaling, then we're coming, or like what we're hearing pretty often are different quotes from organizations, and we have collected some of them. And what we would like to do right now is to do a little quiz with you. We have collected here quotes, and I would ask you to think about like, what kind of approach could that be? So the first one is, if someone would told you, using working software as the primary measure of progress not only changed how we are reporting things, but also shifted our team's orientation of work into a good direction. I think we should apply this idea to other teams in our organization. What do you think? Which kind of approach is that?
Can I launch the poll? Okay, it's launched. So you can guess what is this?
Okay.
And I end the poll.
I see that we're having a lot of Scrum Masters and Agile coaches in here because they read the Agile manifesto probably. And they may have remembered that working software is the primary measure of progress is one of the Agile principles that you would find in the Agile manifesto. So that's one of the core beliefs that the Agile community is following. And of course, therefore, this is a principles-led approach. So we're taking one of the principles from the Agile manifesto in that case and think about like, okay, that helped in one team. Let's think about like, how could that look like on scale? Another quote that we may find in an organization. Oh, I can help you there. Every time I see that happening, I would use XY. That helped me a lot in such situations. What kind of approach is that? What do you think?
It's a little bit more tricky.
Yeah, definitely.
Because XY, it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
Well, let me end the poll now. So it's a little bit more, controversial here.
Definitely, that's definitely something, or most likely something that would be related to a toolbox. Because if you're talking about like one particular solution, hey, we may apply this particular technique or this particular tool because that helped you somewhere, then you're looking to things from a tools perspective. Validating our increment in reviews together with stakeholders helped our team to solve some dedicated business problems. I see that some other teams here are facing comparable challenges. Maybe they can approach them just as we did. That's a pretty challenging, heads up.
It's also a bit challenging. And of course, like the purpose of this quiz is just to spice it up, right? And some of these quotes are, of course, not really black or white, but what is the result here? Yeah, it's because
What we're seeing here is a pattern. Like once that you're thinking of a business challenge, or the moment that you're bringing in a dedicated business challenge in, then you're talking about like a pattern. And here, of course, here you would also see the relation between practice and practice and the pattern. Of course, the review is something that all of you may know from a particular framework. In that case, it would be Scrum. So we're using something from a framework and think about like, okay, how would that help us to solve a business challenge? And the moment that we're bringing that together, or the moment that we're utilizing a framework in order to solve a business challenge, we're doing something in the right way. The next one is, when I searched for scaled agile, I found something that sounds promising. It may be, it may require us a few days of training to understand it, but they seem to have a clear idea of what they are doing. What's that? Ooh, a heads up between the framework and the methodology.
Yeah.
Here we're coming like from the large pursuit of knowledge. If we're saying, okay, we need a couple of days just like to understand the basic things that are behind it, then we're definitely talking about the methodology. And here then there is the counterpart, which would be, I simply like the idea of Scrum and how our teams applied it. Can't we just lift that on the next level? And now we could complete the survey. And those of you who have
yeah, maybe it's a useless thing to do the survey now, because it's just the fifth left. So
you would recognize that this is just like the framework approach, where you're saying, okay, we have experienced something on the team level, which is of course pretty challenging, because I think this was also one of the challenges that was posted in the chat. Like once you have understood an agile practice or good on a team level, and here we're talking about like the entire framework, then we're saying, okay, just like take this as we've done that and think about like, okay, how can we use it on a different level?
yeah, I see there's a lot of question on framework and methodology. Maybe we can take that in the Q&A, because I think it's, of course, these are definitions, right? And we don't want to, that's not the point. It was just like to make the point that actually scaling is just about following one thing that you buy, right? There are multiple approaches, and when you talk about conceptualization, definition, you can go very, very detailed, or just like having something that helps you understand, and that's what we want the point we wanted to make. But I mean, if you want to, just assign a warning, right? And the sign of warning is that, if you can, don't scale, right? If you can do something with 5 people, don't do it with 50 people, right? Because, when you are doing things what you are scaling, you're not scaling the good things. You are also scaling the problems, right? But if you need to scale up, and if you need to, to do it because of business needs, or because of you have to solve some of the problems that you discussed at the end, there are like 3 main challenges that you have to address, or 3 capabilities that you need to build, right? So, and it's not just copy pasting from what others are doing, right? Or using some kind of methodology that, doesn't exist in reality. But these are the most important things. As I usually say, also when things talk about Scrum is easy. Delivering something meaningful, a usable increment in 2 weeks, that's very hard. And if you're scaling, there are 3 things. first of all, it's about the skills of the people, right? When you scale, you need scaled skills, right? And also you need to set up a kind of organizational culture that actually is like prepared for scale collaboration, for cross-team collaboration, for customer collaboration, and also creating scaled competencies, a scaled skill. It's something that doesn't happen overnight. So you need to do it. It's a change process. So be very careful with your change management capabilities, right? It's not something that you can create a goal and then create a grandiose plan and you deliver 30 teams at a week. It just doesn't work like this. So that's why the approach that we have been following during all these years, it's more like we would call a pattern-based, principles-informed approach, right? So we would like to, be driven by principles and then discover together with our clients what are things that work and things that don't work, and the things that work in their specific content, we make them becoming pattern that we can deploy to the rest of the organization. And what are the principles, the 3 principles that we are mainly, be driven by? I mean, first of all, it's, focus on value delivery and removing unnecessary synchronization. And these are connects with the others about, with the strategic choice about number of POs and feature teams and so on and so forth, or how big the product should be and so on. Make your culture explicit and create a culture that is able to decentralize control and decision making, and then validated change in small increment, right? Because the only way to scale agility is by using an agile approach. And we have used this approach at many different clients. Here we can just offer you a couple of examples that you can also go and research on our website. If you can change your slide, the slide. So, one example is, a big company, for those of you who know a little bit about, who lives in the Baltics or Nordics, you might know these banks. It's a big bank that and this is something that goes back to 2018-19. There was like very heavily threatened by competition from fintech. And the question was about how we can have such a big company working in a very flexible way in a highly regulated environment. And we achieved this. Of course, I'm not talking about 16,000 employees, but a business unit of, I think, 1,100 employees, with an iterative incremental approach through leadership education, to co-creating a changing strategy, experimenting new practices, and then coaching, strength support of training and coaching. And what was the result? The result was also, besides creating a new culture, was about also increasing by 10 times the employee engagement index that was very low at the beginning, right? You can still create a change and overcome the resistance to change by creating change that people believe that makes sense, because people are not stupid. So if we treat people like, smart people, then we have a good chance to succeed. And that's not something we can forget, right? And sometimes we forget by just blindly follow pre-prescribed methodologies. Lothar, you also have another example to show, and then we can go through.
Yes. The second case study that that you will find on our website, I talked to our marketing department today. I think we're going to launch the case study in the next weeks, is about large player in the automation industry. And what we're facing here is what Giuseppe earlier described as component teams. And the challenge that the client had is, as they wanted to grow, they needed to shift from component teams to cross-functional teams. So the question is, like, how can we transform to teams that can take over end-to-end responsibilities for products that can be delivered to clients in order to reduce dependencies and overhead. And what came out after 3 months. It's a pretty recent case study, so we don't have that long-term data as Giuseppe has. But after 3 months after the starting point from the transformation, we had a look onto the teams, whether they were able to identify valuable sprint goals, and if they are able to commit to things that they would deliver at the end, and have what I would call a decent predictability. So we said for the next sprint, you have to be certain. And for the second and the third sprint, I would expect like to go down to 80% certainty. And the question was whether we are able to form teams that would be able to take ownership of their own roadmap in order to follow large or serve large clients with a decentralized approach. We will release the case study in the next week. So if you're signed up for our newsletter, you will also get informed about that here. One other thing and one final thing that we want to add about scaling is the Certified Agile Skills Training, the CAS S1. I think, Giuseppe, you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, you know, a new certification from Scrum Alliance, which we are particularly happy with because we finally find something that, you know, is coherent with our beliefs and our approaches that we have been, you know, implementing in the last 16 years or in the whole 16 years of life of Agile 42. So, you know, we are now like decided to offer this certification, which is a new certification, newly from this year, to discuss and actually get some kind of a better understanding about what are different approaches to scaling, what are the principles that should inform you, what are some of the patterns that you could use, and what are the you know, the things you should be very careful about, right? And so we are kind of proud to finally got some kind of you know, name from Scrum Alliance to the things we have been doing the last 16 years. So and so for those of you, we're doing like the first class in a few weeks, and for those of you who attended this, we are happy to offer a discount code, which is basically extending the early bird that has ended already to, you know, just to you whenever you want to use it. So use the QR code to register if you want, and Lothar and myself will be, you know, the trainers. And we hope to see at least some of you there.
One other thing that is also asked very often in classes, and I can already promise as a cliffhanger, is how could that look like in practice question? And part of this training is also that we are working on a particular case study that either can come from the class, or if nobody wants to share their case study, then Giuseppe and I have also a case study prepared that we can tackle and think like how are these different approaches found in the particular case. Perfect.
So I think we are ready to give some space to Q&A, and Bert, if you can help us with that.
Absolutely. Presently, we've got 2 questions that are queued up in the Q&A channel. Just as a reminder to all of our participants, please do place your questions in the Q&A channel so that we can go ahead and address them. We've seen a couple of things come up in the chat, and we've spoken to some folks individually. But again, please feel free to use the Q&A portion to get the questions in. I see we already have a third. I'm going to go ahead and do these in order as they've come in. First question is from Regina, and that is, can you give us examples of each of the approaches to scaling?
Yeah, maybe I can take it. I mean, first of all, I know there's been a lot of discussion about you know, this definition, and of course, like the purpose was not to make you know, some kind of academic teaching, right? It was just to show that if you think about, there are many different ways you can approach the same problems, and depending on which kind of approach you follow, that might end up in good or you know, less good results. And some of these things are very, you know, thin differences. Like, for example, difference between a framework and a methodology is probably connected to how thin the thing is. So for example, if you think about practice-led framework approach, right? For me, you know, the easiest example is to use Scrum as a scaling approach. So to scale the same things that you do with Scrum on one team on multiple teams, and use that as a guiding. And Scrum is a framework because it's left intentionally incomplete. While, you know, if you think about SAFe, I would consider it as a methodology, even though the name says framework, but I wouldn't, you know, I would like to get a conversation with anyone that says that SAFe is something thin, because it's a very heavy, you know, approach with well-defined things, and you say exactly how certain things should be done and so on. While, you know, principle-led approach, it's something that, you know, you scale based on some principles. And you can be guided by the Agile principles, or you can be guided by the 3 principles that I mentioned before, right? And if you think about toolbox, it's more usually when you have a cookbook of things, and that's normally what you have in companies, where you know, a lot of companies are creating their own Agile manual, right? Their own cookbook, and which is usually a mix of methodology and the toolbox, at least in my example, right? And when you talk about patterns, you know, some concrete example of patterns, which is exactly also the pattern we are gonna show. For example, some of the pattern is the 4 that I mentioned before, like, are you using a broad or narrow product definition, using product owner per team or per product? Are you using component or feature teams? Are things that work in a certain context? And also for me, if you think about something like flight levels that Regina was mentioning, flight levels can be considered probably a list of patterns in my eyes, more than a framework. So definitely it's a good approach to scaling. Or for those of you who know, like Scrum Plop by Jeff Sutherland and Jamie Copeland, I mean, we can share some links, or, you know, team topologies can be exactly some of the patterns, like portfolio patterns you might use. But patterns, tools, and things are, you know, useless or can mislead you if you just apply them because someone else is doing. But if you have some principles that guide you, and then you understand your context, then where you can, you know, select the most appropriate practice or patterns that fits your context if you are guided by well-sounded principles. And that's the approach that we want to propose, like principles-guided approach. Yeah, hope this kind of solves some of, but again, it's just to show that there are multiple approaches, not to make a conversational discussion about, you know, an academic definition.
Okay, I have another question here. For the second case study with the 3-month predictability, how is value incorporated into measuring the independence of the teams? i.e., teams can come up with any type of work if you give them space. How is it assessed, so to speak, against business goals and needs?
Yeah. 2 things. One thing that I need to clarify from the beginning is like the 3 month we're describing like from the start of the initiative to where have we been 3 months later. So that's the entire period of the transformation, if you want to say so. The predictability that we wanted to achieve was about 3 sprints, which included in that case 6 weeks. And when we were talking about these 6 weeks, then the product owner were required to build up, like each of the product owners had a product area, and they were asked to prepare like a product roadmap and had a chief product owner or manager in that case as a sparring partner. So the idea was back before the transformation, this was coordinated from an overhead perspective from a chief product owner. and they were responsible for, I would say, managing this entire roadmap thing. And as a part of the transformation, the idea was that we're bringing product owners into the position that they could identify a roadmap for their next 3 sprints. And of course, they would use their chief product owner as a sparring partner and say, hey, by the way, Bert, these are like the next things that I would foresee for my product, for my client, for my clients that I'm dealing with. What do you think about it? And the chief product owner rather became something like a sparring partner. It's not like that the chief product owner was workless tomorrow, but they were not involved in all of the discussions that they had. But the responsibility to care about the product and to get the ownership, what Giuseppe mentioned earlier, we wanted to achieve ownership, was decentralized into the teams. And that was one part of the question. Are the teams able to come up with a reasonable roadmap, commit to reasonable sprint goals, and also then deliver what they committed to? Hope that helps.
Okay. And then we've got another question here. What principles guide you when A, deciding to scale, and B, when scaling?
Okay, I can take this. I mean, for the A, when deciding to scale, I mean, my principle is don't scale unless it's strictly necessary, right? Unless you need so much capability to deliver something in a time that is needed for business, for your business context, and you cannot do with just one team. So, and therefore it goes to our first question about, okay, what is the problem you are trying to solve? So there should be identifying what problem are you trying to solve. It's the most important thing, because that will help you also with the strategy how you get there. And then the principles that guide us and our clients when scaling are the 3 principles that I mentioned, right? The principle that we teach us in our class, that is about focusing on value and organize around that. Make our culture explicit and decentralized control, and the third is validate change in small increment. And maybe I can take also, our question was a question about what make a culture explicit means. I mean, it means exactly this in practice. I mean, we use a tool which is called organizational scan. We can also share some links, and maybe Ernst can share a link on the chat that we use to show a profile of the company or the business unit culture, the organizational culture, that shows about, okay, which kind of culture do you have, how much your culture is inclined to collaboration or not, how much it's inclined to bureaucracy or not. And that tells a lot about where you are and what kind of strategy you need to take in order to move towards a more scaled collaborative approach, right? So it's exactly means make it visible so that everyone can see it, and then evolve your culture from there. I hope that answered this question from our participant.
I could also add to that, in our case studies, we published another case study last year, which is called Organizational Culture Breeds Agility. And here you would see how we make cultural patterns explicit, how we can manage them, or how we can treat cultural patterns once we see them. And we also gave an example of how the same challenge could be answered or conquered from different cultural perspectives. And this is something that is helping us when we talk about scaling or putting agility on an organizational level, because then once we understand the culture, then we know like what are the different, or can have a bit better discussion about like what are the different approaches or options that we're having to approach certain situations. You find a lot of more detailed information in the particular case study, and I hope, Bert, we can put the link also in the chat.
Okay. And I see we've got another question here, and it looks like it's a clarifying call. So it would be basically asking for a more in-depth explanation of making culture explicit for principles of organic scaling.
Yeah, I think we just clarified this.
Okay.
But I hope it's you know the
Sorry about that.
um,
The last question that we've got is one of our guests mentions that their team is having a joint review across their teams, short and crisp, and not any other reviews. What do you recommend to have a sprint review in a team user story level, and also then a joint review across all teams that is rather on feature level?
I mean, I think if those teams are working on the same product, having a product review, so a joint review, as you call it, is a very successful pattern, right? So, I mean, I should know more about the context, but as far as I read, like, having single team reviews when you are delivering one integrated product with the outcome of multiple teams doesn't make really so much sense. So, as it looks like, it's a good practice that you are following. So keep doing it, especially if it works for you.
This is basically one of the challenges, or that one of the cases that we may tackle in the training, because we're having here like different patterns that we could put next to each other. So for example, we could say we're doing one joint review, or we're doing one review per team, and all of them come along with advantages and disadvantages. And it depends on your particular context, which problem are you trying to solve? If multiple teams are working on one joint product, then it would make sense probably to have like a joint review. If multiple teams are dealing with different stakeholders, it may be more beneficial to have separated reviews. But this is where we need to understand, like, what are the patterns that we're having, and are there potentially anti-patterns in there, and how can we evaluate these things against each other? But these are just like cases that we would address, that may address in the training.
Okay, and it looks like we're down to the last couple of minutes here. I know that we've got posted in the chat a lot of follow-up information so that you can contact us on social media, and also to note about our mailer. If you'd like to see more information about Agile 42, as well as on today's topic, please do make sure to sign up for the mailer. You'll go ahead and you'll get invites for upcoming webinar, as well as information on Agile 42. Feel free again to check out the links that we have here in chat. You'll get a transcript and a recording in a follow-up email. So again, thank you for attending today. We were very happy to see all of you here, and we look forward to seeing you the next time we have a webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you again next time.